So the Gospels present the life of Jesus, and they also present the good news. And to this point, we have seen the journey of Jesus as he has gone place to place, healing people, casting out demons, and teaching. We have also seen the reactions of people to what he has done. People love to be healed, they love to be restored, they love to be made whole. But when it came to the doctrine of his teaching, well, many accepted it, others were not so happy, and they wanted to have him killed because they did not like what he was teaching. And in today's episode, we're going to look at the casting out of demons and how this was something that was miraculous and was very beneficial to the man who was possessed. But we see the reaction of the townspeople, and they were not so happy with this event. The Gospel according to Mark 5:1. They came to the other side of the sea, to the region of the Gerasenes. So the last couple of chapters feel like they are in quick succession. First we had Jesus teaching, then he was teaching by the shore, and he had a boat ready in case the crowd decided to swarm him. Then he was on the boat, teaching from the boat to the people who stood by the shore. Afterwards, they began to cross the sea, and a mighty storm comes and he rebukes the storm. So now they have crossed the sea and they're on the other side, and they're getting off the boat to continue on the journey. The Gospel according to Mark 5:2. And as soon as he got out of the boat, there met him out of the tombs a man under the power of an unclean spirit. So as soon as they get to the other side of the sea and they're getting ready to leave the boat, they encounter this individual here, this man who is possessed by an unclean spirit or is demon possessed. And we have a little bit of his background here, so let's take a look at that quick. The Gospel according to Mark 5:3. The man continually lived among the tombs, and no one could subdue him any more, even with a chain. 5:4. For he had been bound often with shackles for the feet and handcuffs, but the handcuffs of light chains he wrenched apart, and the shackles he rubbed and ground together and broke in pieces, and no one had strength enough to restrain or tame him. 5:5. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains he was always shrieking and screaming and beating and brushing and cutting himself with stones. So they get off the boat and they encounter this man, and he is very peculiar. We see that he is surrounded by tombs, so he is essentially in a graveyard. So it was probably very spooky, especially when you consider the actions of this man, that he's just there screaming and moaning and abusing himself, cutting himself. Certainly a very terrifying individual, and you can see that the townspeople, they wanted to get this guy out of there. So they tried to bind him, to tie him up, but he would break free. He would break out of the handcuffs. He would grind his shackles against the stones to wear them away. And there was nothing they could do to stop him. There was nothing they could do to help him. They could not get him out of the area. So it was very problematic. Now, from the descriptions of the things that we see here, it sounds a lot like what we would call mental illness nowadays, and we would probably have very strong drugs to pacify an individual with symptoms like that now. But we see here in the previous line that this is a result of his demon possession, that they are controlling him and they are making him do these things. And it is certainly off-putting. But let's see what happens next. The Gospel according to Mark 5:6. And when from a distance he saw Jesus, he ran and fell on his knees before him in homage. 5:7. And cried out with a loud voice. He said, What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? What is there in common between us? I solemnly implore you, by God, do not begin to torment me. I always find it interesting how the demons are able to immediately identify Jesus. There's something outside of the realm of perception that they're able to pick up on to know that it is him. And we see here that this demon is pleading with Jesus not to torment him. This tells us quite a few things. The demons recognize God. They realize that what they are doing is wrong and that they will be tormented, and that being tormented is not a pleasant thing, something that they do not want to experience. So this demon here is trying to negotiate with Jesus to prevent the torment. So let's see what happens here. The Gospel according to Mark 5:8. For Jesus was commanding, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." 5:9. And he asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." 5:10. And he kept begging him urgently not to send them, himself and the other demons, away out of that region. So the demon was pleading with Jesus and trying to get him to agree, because God is unable to lie. If he agreed to the terms of the demon, he would be bound by it. But that is not what we see here. Jesus did not agree to the terms of this demon. Instead, he cast him out on the spot and asked him for his name. Now, Jesus didn't ask for his name because he needed to do that in order to cast him out. This was done for the benefit of the disciples and us, the readers, that we now know that when someone is demon possessed, it is not necessarily one demon. In fact, it can be thousands of them, as demonstrated here by Legion. Legion, of course, being the classification of an army standard. So perhaps thousands. So Jesus cast him out, and we see that the demon here is pleading not to be cast out of the region. Now, we don't necessarily know for certainty why that was the case. Many believe it's the idea that if the demon was driven very far away, that there would be nobody for them to inhabit. So they wanted to be in the same region so they could just go and possess somebody else. There's probably a lot of other things going on behind the scenes that we're not privy to. When it comes to the nature of demons or angels or some of these other things, we simply don't have the capacity to really understand what exactly is going on there. It's like a different dimension that these entities operate in. The Gospel according to Mark 5:11. Now a great herd of hogs was grazing there on the hillside. 5:12. And the demons begged him, saying, "Send us into the hogs, that we may go into them." My first thought when reading this was thinking of the law and how the Israelites were forbidden from the consumption of pork, which is also pigs, or is also known as hogs. So why is it that they would have this amount of them out there in this area? But this is not the height of the Israelite. They are in an occupation by the Romans. So there are Gentiles around. So even if these hogs here are being raised by those of Jewish lineage, they would be for the consumption of the Gentiles, the non-Israelites. Unless, of course, the Israelites are the ones consuming this and they are breaking the law. Of course, this could also be that the Gentiles are the ones raising these hogs. So there's many different possibilities here. Something else to have as a note is that the ones looking after these animals are not necessarily the ones that own them. Perhaps these are the servants or the workers of those that have ownership of these animals. Pigs are more intelligent than goats and sheep, and they can forage for their own food. And this is mounty, rocky terrain, so perhaps that is why they are here. So the demons, rather than being cast out of the country or the region, they would much prefer to be cast into these animals. The Gospel according to Mark 5:13. So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out of the man and entered into the hogs, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed headlong down the steep slope into the sea and were drowned in the sea. So Jesus allowed their request and allowed these demons to take possession of these animals. Now, there may have been as many demons as there was animals. There could have been more demons than there was animals. There could also be less, because this sounded like a stampede situation where the animals, when they were taken possession of, they just went wild and stampeded right into the water and drowned in the sea. So they all died. Now, it's hard to say whether or not the demons died with the animals that they possessed. We don't really know how that works. Maybe they did, but maybe they didn't. And perhaps they're still waiting for that time of torment, possessing other people over the years, over the decades, over the centuries, I guess even millennia at this point. So, we'll see. The Gospel according to Mark 5:14. The hog feeders ran away and told it in the town and in the country, and the people came to see what it was that had taken place. 5:15. And they came to Jesus and looked intently and searchingly at the man who had been a demonic, sitting there clothed and in his right mind, the same man who had the legion of demons, and they were seized with alarm and struck with fear. So the hog feeders, they were responsible for these hogs, and seeing all of them die in front of them, they were in a little bit of a pickle. So they ran back to town, and they told the people there, they told presumably the owners of these hogs, all these events that had transpired, and I'm sure the entire town came out to see what happened, and came and saw this man, the one that was demon possessed. Everybody in town would have known about him or have seen him, and perhaps were warned as children to stay away from that area due to that lunatic. And what did they see? They saw this man clothed and in his right mind, something that they thought was impossible. They probably tried everything to help this guy, and there was nothing they could do for him. But now they see him restored. So it certainly is a miracle, but at the same time, all this livestock has been killed. The Gospel according to Mark 5:16. And those who had seen it related in full what had happened to the man possessed by demons and to the hogs. 5:17. And they began to beg Jesus to leave their neighborhood. These people probably had a concern for this man who was demon possessed, but they probably had a greater concern for their livelihood related to these hogs. So in one sense, they were happy to see this man restored, but in the other, it really flipped the entire town upside down. For what are they going to do now that these hogs are gone? So they asked him to leave. So on to the next adventure. The Gospel according to Mark 5:18. And when he had stepped into the boat, the man who had been controlled by the unclean spirits kept begging him that he might be with him. 5:19. But Jesus refused to permit him, but said to him, Go home to your own family and relatives and friends, and bring back word to them how much the Lord has done for you, and how he has had sympathy for you and mercy on you. 5:20. And he departed and began to publicly proclaim in Decapolis, the region of the 10 cities, how much Jesus has done for him, and all the people were astonished and marveled. So this man who has been healed of so much wants to follow Jesus, the one who healed him. But Jesus did not allow him to get on the boat and come with them on their journey. Instead, he told the man to go back home to see his family. I'm sure his family has written him off as being the lunatic at the tombs, because he's probably been there for quite some time and they thought he would never be okay again. But Jesus is sending him home so that he can tell his family of what God has done for him. Of course, Jesus doesn't want this man to tell everybody, because he's already getting quite infamous at this point, and it could throw things off if too many people find out too early for his plan. Of course, this man doesn't listen, and how can he withhold his tongue when it comes to speaking of the greatness of God and what he has done for him? For he has been saved of a tremendous ailment, and he is unable to muzzle himself and feels compelled to tell everybody that he encounters of the greatness of what has occurred. The Gospel according to Mark 5:21. And when Jesus had recrossed in the boat to the other side, a great throng gathered about him, and he was at the lakeshore. 5:22. Then one of the rulers of the synagogue came up, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he prostrated himself at his feet. So they get back on their boat and they return from which they came. And the crowd is still there waiting for them. And when they get across, Jesus encounters this man Jairus, who is a religious leader or a ruler of the synagogue. So a person of authority. Some of the religious leaders that we've encountered and some we will encounter later don't like what Jesus is doing and they seek to have him killed. But this man here, Jairus, is here for a different purpose. He has prostrated himself before Jesus and is going to ask of him something. The Gospel according to Mark 5:23. And begged him earnestly, saying, My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be healed and live. 5:24. And Jesus went with him, and a great crowd kept following him, and pressed him from all sides, so as almost to suffocate him. So this man has a very sickly daughter, and she is dying, and she needs help. There is no one else that he can go to, and he has heard probably the reputation of Jesus that he has healed other people, so he is at the end. He has nothing else he can really try, and he is prostrating himself before Jesus to ask for mercy, to ask for healing for his daughter. So this sets up a new adventure where they go on a journey to this man's house to help her. But there's some events that transpire before they get there, and that's what we're going to see now. The Gospel according to Mark 5:25. And there was a woman who had a flow of blood for 12 years. 5:26. And who had endured much suffering under the hands of many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, but instead grew worse. So in this crowd, we see that there is a woman that has been sick for 12 years. She has had a flow of blood, so a menstrual type of ailment that doesn't cease. It's just a continuous thing. And under the law and the rules, a woman who is during her flow is excluded from the group. She is considered unclean, so that restricts some of the activities she is allowed to participate in, and I'm sure this was a very uncomfortable experience. Not only do you have the pain and the suffering from the ailment itself, but you have the isolation that is caused from it as well. So it's a double whammy. And everyone she's gone to see to help her hasn't been able to help her, and it's made it worse. So maybe whatever they tried to do for treatment just caused additional pain and suffering. And after 12 years and trying all these other approaches, she hasn't had any luck. But now she hears of a different healer. And that's what we're going to see here. The Gospel according to Mark. 5:27. She had heard the reports concerning Jesus, and she came up behind him in the throng and touched his garment. 5:28. For she kept saying, if I only touch his garments, I shall be restored to health. 5:29. And immediately her flow of blood was dried up at the source, and suddenly she felt in her body that she was healed of her distressing ailment. 12 years is a very long time to be suffering with an ailment of any type, and this sounds like a particularly unpleasant one. And I'm sure that as the years went by and as she met these different healers and physicians, that she was hopeful that maybe this would be the one to cure her or to solve this issue. And one by one, they all failed and nothing improved. But now she has heard the rumor of Jesus and the miracles that he has performed. And we see that she had faith in his ability to heal her. And her faith was so great that she didn't need to ask him or have conversation or have anything of that nature. Her faith was so strong that she believed that simply touching his garment would be enough to heal her. And apparently it was. She touched his garment and the healing came to her and she was cured of her condition. Certainly quite the testament of faith. But this isn't the end of the story. The Gospel according to Mark. 5:30. And Jesus, recognizing in himself that the power proceeding from him had gone forth, turned around immediately in the crowd and said, who touched my clothes? 5:31. And the disciples kept saying to him, you see the crowd pressing hard around you from all sides, and you ask, who touched me? So Jesus is being swarmed by people. It's a huge throng of people. And I'm sure they're all touching him or brushing up against him. There's hands reaching out left, right, and the center. And somebody touches his coat and he knows that they received healing from him. And then he asks, who touched him? And the disciples, they see this. They don't see that this woman has been healed. They don't know any of this. That's not stuff that's visible. It's not the same as a crippled man standing up. We have this private matter here being healed, and they don't know what's going on. They didn't see any healing. They didn't know why he was asking this. He's in a crowd of people. Everyone's touching him. But the woman here, she knew what happened. She knew that she was healed. She knew she was restored. And she knew he was talking about her. The Gospel according to Mark. 5:33. But the woman, knowing what had been done for her, though alarmed and frightened and trembling, fell down before him and told him the whole truth. 5:34. And he said to her, daughter, your faith, your trust and confidence in me, springing from faith in God, has restored you to health. Go into peace, and be continually healed and freed from your distressing bodily disease. So Jesus knew the entirety of what happened, and he could have just let this transpire and not said anything. But he called out to the woman to get her to explain these events and to explain how much she has suffered and what she has gone through and how touching his coat healed her. And he explained that it wasn't the act of touching his coat that caused the healing. The healing was from God. So he explained some of these things to her, and this is for the benefit of the disciples that are there with him and probably the witnesses to this event, and especially us, the readers. We have this really interesting story here of faith and trust and the power of God and what God can do. It's pretty cool. The Gospel according to Mark 5:35. While he was still speaking, there came some from the ruler's house who said to Jairus, "Your daughter has died. Why bother and distress the teacher any further?" 5:36. Overhearing but ignoring what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not be seized with alarm and struck with fear, only keep on believing." So while Jesus is communicating to this woman about this matter going on here, I'm sure the story when they're actually talking to her is probably a lot more elaborate, and it's condensed down in the version that we are reading. So maybe they were talking 15, 20 minutes, if not longer. And we have this messenger that shows up and says that the girl is dead, that they don't need to go there anymore, and stop bothering the teacher. Stop bothering Jesus. Let him go about his things. There's nothing that can be done now. Jesus overhears this. He ignores him. And we have a call to faith, a call to belief. So there's multiple ways to look at this. One would be that maybe she's not dead. Maybe she's just unconscious and she looked dead, had the appearance of it. Throughout history, there's been many occasions of people being buried alive due to their inability to determine whether or not they are dead or not. They had a whole system, and there was a time when they would have bells that they'd be buried, and if they woke up, they could ring the bell. The gravekeeper could go dig them up and send them on their way. So there was that whole aspect. But I don't think that's what's going on here. I think she was probably dead. Maybe she was starting to get cold. But Jesus calls this man to faith, to belief, and trust. He has done all these other wonderful miracles, and he wants the man to focus on him and not this external noise of what is impossible, what can and cannot be done. Keep your eyes on Christ for salvation. Well, let's see what happens. The Gospel according to Mark 5:37. And he permitted no one to accompany him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. So Jesus wasn't about to take this throng of people in to see this sick girl and heal her in front of all these people and make this grand spectacle of it. He instead takes only a select few, the elect, his disciples with him. Or some of his disciples, I should say. For this little girl, that's probably a good thing. She doesn't want to wake up from being dead and find herself surrounded by thousands of people. That would just be ridiculous. No, Jesus gets everybody to stay back, and he goes in with the small group. The Gospel according to Mark 5:38. When they arrived at the house of the ruler of the synagogue, he looked carefully and with understanding at the tumult and the people weeping and wailing loudly. So they walk into this household, and it is a funeral. The people are wailing and crying and weeping, and it is just, by worldly appearances, terrible timing. It's like, here comes the healer now that she is dead. Of course, they have no idea who it is that just came in. The Gospel according to Mark 5:39. And when he had gone in, he said to them, "Why do you make an uproar and weep? The little girl is not dead, but is sleeping." 5:40. And they laughed and jeered at him, but he put them all out. And taking the child's father and mother and those who were with him, he went in where the little girl was lying. So imagine this situation. The whole family's gathered together. They're all concerned with this sickly girl, and she stops breathing. And so they leave the room. Her body is there, still getting cold, and they've left the room, and they're crying and wailing And it's just a very sad thing. Then this guy comes in through the door, and he asks why they're crying and weeping. And the situation is just absolutely ridiculous. Who is this guy? What is he doing here? Why is he asking this? And the only thing that people can do when they're faced with impossible circumstance or a situation so far out of the norm or so unexpected is laugh. And so they laugh at him for asking this question. They laugh him to scorn. How could you just come in here and presume that she is just sleeping? Like, that's just ridiculous. They didn't know who this man was. They knew that the master of the house went out to try to find a healer, but they didn't know anything about him. They didn't know what he was capable of or who he was. They just laughed at him. So Jesus ignores this laughter, and he separates the father and the mother and takes his disciples, or the ones that came with him, in to see this little girl. The mother, I'm sure, was quite devastated at this point in time, seeing her daughter pass away. The father, he heard the thing of the messenger that she was dead, but he was trusting in Jesus that he would be able to heal him. When Jesus said, "Don't worry what these people are saying, it's not true. She's just sleeping." So they proceed into this room to see the little girl. The unbelievers here, the ones that laughed at scorn, they don't get to see this miracle. They don't get to see it perform. They are excluded. The Gospel according to Mark. 5:41. Gripping her firmly by the hand, he said to her, "Talitha Kumi," which translated is, "Little girl, I say to you, arise from the sleep of death." 5:42. And instantly the girl got up and started walking around, for she was 12 years old, and they were utterly astonished and overcome with amazement. 5:41. And he strictly commanded and warned them that no one should know this, and he expressly told them to give her something to eat. So when we read this story, it's a very short story. It's only several sentences long, but I'm sure for this man who went on this journey to find Jesus, to relay his problem and then to journey back, I'm sure it was a much longer event. We don't know how long it took him to find Jesus. Maybe he was across the street, or maybe he had to look for him for a prolonged period of time. We don't really know exactly how this happened. But we do know that he remained faithful and trusted in Jesus and journeyed with him despite all these interruptions along the way and all this pressure trying to denounce the ability to save this daughter. But now he was faithful and he followed Jesus, and we see the daughter restored. And that's pretty cool. We see Jesus holding onto the girl's hand and telling her to get up. What a comfort that is. And she is restored, and then he sees to it that she is fed. She's probably been in bad health for some time and then probably died. So she probably hasn't eaten in days. So she needs to get her strength back and recover. So we kind of have a little bit of a rehabilitation. And then after all this is done, we see something that we have seen before, where he forbids them from telling everybody about this event here that has happened, the events that have transpired. The miracles are for those that believe, and those who do not believe would not believe even if they saw the miracles. And that's just a wonderful way to end off the chapter.